Hello, everybody. This is Fernando for the latest Silent Hill podcast. Alright, let's go ahead and we'll talk about the next creature encountered within the Silent Hill 2 video game. I'm still watching the video game. I haven't done a video in a while only because time has been a little bit limited on my end. And so this time around, I found some free time today, so it was good to continue this particular series. This is by far one of the weirdest, strange creatures encountered within anything involving Silent Hill yet, because usually the Silent Hill monsters, they're very reminiscent of something. Like they either look like some kind of animal or they look like some kind of person. But in this case, this just throws everything out the window. I've never seen anything quite like it before in any of the previous monsters, and I'm talking about the very unique creature known as the Fleshlip, which is actually a boss. It could be considered the very first boss within Silent Hill 2. And it's encountered shortly after that mischievous little girl Laura tricks the main character James Sunderland inside some kind of room while he's there in the hospital. She purposely, I guess she knows about that monster, or somehow, even though the game says that she's really innocent, so she doesn't see monsters, but how she somehow knew that this thing was going to be there, I don't know. But she locks James Sunderland inside the room with the ruse that there's another letter from Mary in there. And so once he's locked inside and he turns around, that's when he starts hearing like this monster-like groan or growl of some sort. And then that's when this thing comes down. It has a very prominent cutscene, so it clearly shows the distinction of it being a pretty important boss. And you'll see a picture of it here, and again, it's quite unique. Basically, it's something that looks like a mattress that has legs, or parts of the legs, at least with regards to its ankles and its feet, hanging right underneath it. And then it's a little hard to see while the game is playing and while the action is happening, but in the middle of those legs are a pair of mouth lips, and that's why it's called flesh lips, because the entire body of the monster itself looks like a living mound of flesh, and then its biggest prominent distinct feature when you see it are those flesh lips themselves. In fact, they apparently do like some kind of smacking sound of some sort, as if they're eager to try to bite the opponent altogether. How they attack is there's two of them that come down within the very first interaction. They come down through the very edges of the wall, and then they start to move towards the main character James while they're hanging from the ceiling. It looks like the tiles on the top of the ceiling where they meet on the edges, basically the outlines of the tiles themselves, are how these things move, because they tend to move in like box-like movements. In other words, they don't move diagonally, they don't move in circles. Instead, they'll slowly jaunt straight towards somebody, and then when they get to the edge of a tile and that person, in this case James, has moved, let's say, to the left, then they only move to the left when they reach the end of that tile with enough room to move to the left on the tile itself. So pretty bizarre creature, the way it acts, the way it moves. Its whole purpose is to try to get as close as possible to James, and then that way it can use its legs to strangle the guy or whoever the player is. And even if it's not close by to James, then it'll create like a swinging motion, so that way it'll try to swing and use the momentum to bring it even closer to the main character. The guy that I was watching play the game, he knew apparently that there's a lot of damage that this thing can do, because it looks, quite frankly, it looks like a really ridiculous monster, but he was taking this thing very seriously. Like, he stood away as far as possible at all times, and even when it tried to get close and tried to do that rocking motion, he was able to move as quickly as possible away from it. He did a pretty good job. He never let this thing attack it at all. Because another way that it attacks too is it tries to do some kind of slamming motion. If it rocks enough, apparently, then it'll slam right next to the player, creating a good amount of damage. Easiest way to beat this thing is, obviously, to try to stay away, is to use a shotgun, because anything involving the shotgun, it'll create enough power to bring this thing down. The guy that I saw, he had to do a whole lot of shots. I think he did somewhere around 8 shots each flesh lip. So it was not an easy thing altogether. And then finally, there was the third one that comes down. I guess you could call it the boss of the boss in this particular battle. And the distinction with it is same power, but it seems to move much quicker than the previous two flesh lips. And this guy that I was watching, he defeated it pretty easily, just following the same strategy. In a weird sense, because there's only one now as opposed to the previous two, then it's a little easier this time around because there's more space to move. And it seems like that's what the flesh lips do, is they try to work in coordination, where one will come to the left, one will come towards the right, and then that way they can try to attack from two areas instead of just coming from one area at the same time. Now, what they're supposed to represent, there's some clear symbolism here. It's pretty straightforward. With the appearance of the flesh lip looking like a bed, they're supposed to represent the main location that James's wife Mary suffered in through the last who knows how long time of her life. I mean, she was there clearly for months, if not maybe years. And so it's supposed to be a clear representation of her home, because basically the bed was her home altogether. And then the mouth that's on the bottom of the flesh lip, it's supposed to represent the very nasty things, the cruel words that Mary, in her state of suffering, kept saying to James, especially towards the end of her days. Apparently she would not be very nice to him, and she would call him mean things, through not really through her own fault, it's just through the suffering that she was having. She basically took out her aggression for this cruelty on James himself, and so that's what they're supposed to represent too. And then the way that the creature looks, it looks like it's confined within some kind of cage. It's also supposed to represent how Mary is confined to her terminal illness, or was, and that's why she was not able to break free of that illness. She was basically caged into it. Also, it's interesting to note, this flesh lip, it's a preview of the very final boss within Silent Hill 2, because Mary turns into one of these things much more powerful than the flesh lips themselves, but she turns into a larger cousin of the flesh lip later on in the game. So a very nice preview there altogether. Now, the flesh lips do make one more appearance. It's in the Silent Hill Book of Memories, which you'll see a picture of here. Rather than being the boss within the game, they're more along the lines of a common enemy, like a grunt of sorts. They just simply spawn throughout several rooms altogether, and it's a frequently occurring enemy, so you'll see them many times within the game itself. And then as far as early concept art, you'll see a picture of it here. You'll notice that it pretty much stayed true to form, short of having the cage wrapping around it. This was supposed to be instead cageless, and it had the same features as before. The only clear distinct difference is, rather than the mouth looking like the mouth itself, it had more along the lines of what's called, it's a weird word, but it's called a protuberance, which is like an enhanced mouth, or it's kind of like a semi-face of some sort. So it was supposed to be more pronounced. It was like let's say Siamese twins, or someone that's born with a conjoined twin, but they're not fully developed. It looks like that's what this thing was supposed to have as well. And then whenever you defeat this enemy, the flesh lip, it goes through a pretty weird cut scene. It's still quite bizarre, because I had to rewind it and watch that probably like 5 times, where it looks like he's traveling in the air of some sort. He's being guided through some hallway within the hospital, but then the way the cutscene turns and the way the angle turns, is like he's passing through walls. It's very weird. And then he's almost like upside down also. And so that way when he actually turns upright, now he's looking at a different place, and sure enough the world itself has turned into the other world within the game. So pretty important cutscene afterward too. So what do you guys think? The flesh lip first boss encountered within Silent Hill 2. And then once I reach Maria or Mary as the final boss, or in some cases Maria, depending on how you play the game, then I'll be able to talk more about the cousin of it later on too. So, alright everybody, thanks again as always, take care.